I've had that question asked so many times and so hard to answer because there are obviously things that stand out about all of them. I think what I remember most about films is the people that I've worked with rather than the film itself. And I don't think it'll ever get any better than it was on this film.
Most people think they know Sam Elliott. They know the mustache, the drawl, and the slow, steady voice that can make a car commercial feel like a Western epic. What they do not know is the man behind all of that. Far from the cameras and the Hollywood parties, Sam Elliott lives a life rooted in open land that has quietly outlasted almost everything else in the entertainment industry. And the place where all of that plays out most clearly is his Malibu ranch. Let's find out what goes on inside Sam Elliott's Malibu ranch together. Come along. The ranch that became a home. When most people picture Malibu, they picture glass mansions stacked along the Pacific Coast Highway, paparazzi waiting outside restaurants, and celebrities who treat their homes like temporary stopovers between premieres. Sam Elliott is not most people. His Malibu property sits apart from all of that, not just in distance, but in spirit. Tucked near the Santa Monica Mountains and removed from the glare of the typical celebrity neighborhood, the ranch has always felt more like a working property than a status symbol. The home itself was built in 1983 and covers approximately 3,680 square feet, with 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms spread across a structure that sits on 3 acres of land. The construction is primarily wood, which gives the property its unmistakably rustic character from the moment you approach it. 2 large stone pillars mark the entrance, and they set the tone for everything inside. This is not a house designed to impress strangers. It is a house designed to shelter a family and reflect the values of the people living in it. The interior follows the same principle. Dark timber accents run through the living areas, and soaring wooden beams line the ceilings. There is a stone fireplace at the heart of the home, the kind of feature that tells you something about how a family actually spends its evenings. An open kitchen sits nearby, practical and warm, rather than designed to look like it belongs in a design magazine. Earth tones dominate the rooms, and Western artwork appears throughout the space in a way that feels genuinely personal rather than decorative. Elliot and his wife, actress Catherine Ross, have lived at this Malibu property since they came together in 1978. That is not a small detail. In a city where real estate transactions happen as often as relationship changes, staying in the same home for decades says something deliberate about a person. The property has served as the place where they raised their only daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott, and where the rhythms of daily life have always mattered more than the noise of the industry around them. Elliot has spoken about the Malibu land in ways that make clear it is more than real estate. In an interview with Cowboys and Indians magazine, he described it as a beautiful piece of ground, and that phrase alone reveals how he sees it. Not an asset, not a property. Ground. The kind of language a rancher uses, not a Hollywood actor. The ocean views from the property stretch out wide from the hillside position, and the native plants surrounding the home create a natural buffer that keeps the outside world at a manageable distance. The architecture of the home itself tells a story about what its owners value. Unlike the sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling glass that define the modern Malibu aesthetic, the Elliott property leans into natural materials and honest construction. Wood does not pretend to be anything other than wood. Stone does not pretend to be marble. The house was built to age gracefully rather than to impress immediately, and after more than 4 decades, it has done exactly that. The character it carries now is earned rather than designed. But the Malibu Ranch is only part of the story of how Sam Elliott chooses to live. The property values and the ocean setting aside, it has always been a working home rather than a showpiece. The fact that Elliott kept this same address through decades of career success, through roles in films like Tombstone, Roadhouse, The Big Lebowski, and A Star is Born, says everything about his priorities. When the work is done, he comes back to the same land. That consistency is rare in Hollywood, and rarer still when you consider how much the surrounding neighborhood has changed around him over the years. The property value of the Malibu home has been estimated at approximately $4.2 million, which places it at the upper end of the range for properties in that part of the coast. But the figure almost feels beside the point when you understand how Elliot relates to the place. He does not talk about it in terms of investment returns or market trends. He talks about it the way someone talks about a home they intend to keep. And for more than 4 decades, that is exactly what he has done. Neighbors in the Malibu Canyon area have generally described Elliot and Ross as respectful and quiet presences within the community. Unlike many celebrity neighbors who generate constant attention, the couple keeps a schedule oriented around the land itself. The same principle that governs how they built their Oregon ranch, selecting property for its wildlife and working character rather than its trophy appeal, applies to how they inhabit the Malibu home. The land matters more than the address. The night the fire came. November 2018 will not be forgotten by anyone who lived through it in Malibu. The Woolsey fire tore through the area with a speed and ferocity that left entire neighborhoods reduced to ash in a matter of hours. For Sam Elliott, that fire was not something he watched on television from a safe distance. It came directly to his property, and the memory of it stayed with him long after the smoke cleared. At the time, Elliot was in the middle of promoting A Star is Born, the Bradley Cooper-directed film in which he played Bobby, the older brother of Cooper's character. It was a career-defining role that earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor the following year. The promotional duties had him traveling and doing press when word came that the fire was moving toward Malibu. He rushed back. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Elliot talked about what happened that night in terms that made it clear he did not simply watch from a safe spot. He was on the ground with the firefighters, helping in whatever way he could to protect the property. He described watching the house directly behind his burn to the ground and watching the home next door suffer the same fate. The fire came close enough that survival felt uncertain for a time. But the Malibu home survived. The firefighters held the line, and when the smoke settled, Elliot's property was among the ones still standing in a neighborhood that had been devastated. He spoke about the experience with the kind of gratitude that comes from someone who understands exactly what was at stake, not just financially, but personally. This was the home where he had lived with Catherine Ross for decades, the place where his daughter grew up. Losing it would have meant losing something irreplaceable. The Woolsey Fire was one of the most destructive wildfires in California history, burning more than 95,000 acres and destroying nearly 1,500 structures. Many of Elliot's neighbors were not as fortunate. Celebrities and ordinary residents alike lost homes that night. The fire did not distinguish between the famous and the unknown. It burned what it reached, and what it reached was enormous. For Elliot, surviving the fire seemed to deepen rather than loosen his connection to the property. There is something about nearly losing a place that clarifies its value. The Malibu home had already been his anchor for 4 decades. After November 2018, it became something he had also fought to keep. That changes the relationship between a person and a place in ways that are difficult to fully put into words. The timing of the fire added another layer to how deeply it registered. Elliot was not simply a homeowner watching his investment threatened. He was a husband and father who had raised a family in those rooms, who had spent decades building a daily life on that specific piece of ground. When the smoke came and the houses around him burned, the full weight of what that home represented became impossible to ignore. Living in the Malibu canyons has always carried risk. Fire season in Southern California is not a distant threat, but a recurring reality for anyone who chooses that landscape. Elliot and Ross understood this when they first settled there, and they have lived with it every year since. The fact that they stayed after the 2018 fire says something about how deeply rooted they are in that particular piece of ground. It is not a place they picked because it was convenient or fashionable. It is a place they chose and kept choosing. The experience also brought into sharp relief the things that matter most when everything is threatened. A home filled with decades of memories, a marriage that had been built in that space, a family that had grown up within those walls. The fire tested all of it, and in the end, left it standing. That is not a small thing in a neighborhood where so many others were not as fortunate. Horses, Oregon, and the life he really wants. Ask Sam Elliott where he truly feels at home, and the answer, at least in his heart, is Oregon. He was born in Sacramento in 1944, but when his family moved to Portland when he was 13, something shifted permanently. The Pacific Northwest got into him in a way that California never fully replaced, and the proof is in the land he eventually purchased there. Elliot and Catherine Ross own a 200-acre ranch in Harrisburg, Oregon, located in the heart of the Willamette Valley. The property was acquired in the mid-1990s and sits in Lynn County, nestled between Corvallis and Eugene. The ranch house itself is modest, covering approximately 1,853 square feet, with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The building is classic ranch style, low and horizontal, built for function rather than impression. What makes the property remarkable is not the structure, but what surrounds it. In a 2013 interview with Cowboys and Indians magazine, Elliot described the Oregon property in his own words. He called it a couple of 100 acres of grassland and oak savanna in the foothills of the Willamette Valley, a rich piece of ground with a lot of wildlife. That description captures something essential about why the place means so much to him. It is not a manicured estate designed to signal success. It is working land, land that breathes and changes with the seasons, land that asks something of the people living on it. Horses have been a constant thread through Elliot's life and the lives of those closest to him. Catherine Ross has spoken extensively about her love of horses, telling Cowboys and Indians magazine in 2016 that she first fell in love with them at the age of 7 on a pony ride, going around in circles and grinning from ear to ear. She went on to ride in several films, including Rodeo Girl, The Legacy, and Shadow Riders. She noted that her own horse was the first thing she bought after completing her first movie, Shenandoah. For Elliot, the connection to horses runs through his career as much as his personal life. He has ridden on screen in numerous productions, and the physicality required for Western roles was never something he needed to fake. He came to those performances with a genuine comfort around horses that audiences could sense even if they could not explain exactly why. The ease was real because the familiarity was real. The Oregon Ranch gives that part of his life room to exist away from any camera. Elliot has spoken openly about his desire to move to Oregon full-time. In a 2016 interview with The Oregonian, he said that Oregon always feels like home, and that at some point, moving back there permanently was the dream. He mentioned having a place in the Willamette Valley, down near Eugene, and expressed a clear longing to make it his permanent base. The comment was not a throwaway line in a press interview. It was the kind of statement that only comes from someone who means it, someone counting down to a different chapter of life. When he shops for supplies near the Harrisburg area, locals have described him as relaxed and approachable, someone who does not carry the weight of celebrity into the local hardware store or garden supply shop. One employee at a local gardening supply store called Down to Earth was quoted describing Elliot as personable and easy, adding that if all of Hollywood were like that, it would be a better world. That kind of local reputation does not happen by accident. It happens when someone shows up as themselves, rather than as a version of their public image. The Willamette Valley itself shapes the experience of living there in meaningful ways. Known for its agricultural richness and scenic landscapes, the valley has a slower pace and a different relationship with the land than coastal California. Farming communities anchor the area, and wildlife is genuinely abundant across the oak savanna that Elliot has described on his property. The shift from the Santa Monica Mountains backdrop of Malibu to the rolling grassland and forest of the Willamette Valley represents 2 completely different ways of being in the world. Elliot also owns the Portland home where his mother lived, inheriting it after her death in 2012. He has described still spending time there, still feeling connected to the city where his school years unfolded. He attended David Douglas High School in Portland, graduating in 1962, and went on to Clark College in Vancouver, Washington, before eventually heading to California to pursue acting. The Portland home ties him to that history in a tangible way, a sentimental anchor that tells the story of where he came from. The dream of eventually settling in Oregon full-time reflects something consistent about who Sam Elliott has always been. Even at the height of his career, When the work kept pulling him back to California and to film sets across the country, the desire to return to quieter ground remained. The Oregon ranch represents a future he has been building toward even while the present kept him engaged with Hollywood. Some men dream of escape. Elliot has been quietly preparing for arrival. The love story that outlasted Hollywood. If the Malibu Ranch is the physical expression of Sam Elliott's private life, the love story at its center is the emotional foundation. He and Catherine Ross have been married since 1984, and the marriage predates much of what most people recognize as his career. They were together before Tombstone, before Roadhouse, before The Big Lebowski, before the Academy Award nomination. The relationship is older than most of his best-known work. The story of how they got together is one of those Hollywood coincidences that worked out in the best possible way. Elliot and Ross both appeared in Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid in 1969, but they were operating in entirely different orbits. Ross was a leading actress in the film, playing Etta Place opposite Paul Newman and Robert Redford. Elliot had an uncredited appearance in a saloon scene, later described by himself in an interview with AARP magazine as card player number 2. They shared a film but not a scene, and they did not meet. The actual meeting came nearly a decade later, in 1978, on the set of The Legacy. Both had lead roles in the film, and the connection that formed there was the beginning of everything else. They began dating after the film wrapped and eventually married in May 1984. For Ross, it was her 5th marriage. For Elliot, it was his first and only. He has never spoken about the marriage as anything other than something he intended to be permanent from the beginning. Just 4 months after their wedding, in September 1984, Cleo Rose Elliott was born in Malibu. Their daughter grew up on the ranch, attending Malibu High School and Colin McEwen High School, according to the Malibu Times. She absorbed the values of 2 parents who, despite their public careers, kept a deliberately private home life. Cleo went on to pursue music rather than acting, which her parents actively encouraged. She has described them as totally supportive of her musical direction, and both have appeared with her at public events over the years in ways that communicate a family unit that functions even when it is visible. The relationship between Ross and Cleo went through a serious rupture in March 2011, when Ross filed for a restraining order after a physical incident at the home. The request was suspended less than 30 days after it was granted, and in the years since, the mother and daughter have appeared together regularly at public events. Elliot himself has spoken about his relationship with Cleo with open warmth, describing her as someone who will always be his little girl, regardless of how old she gets. The family has presented a unified front rather than allowing the difficulty to define how they are seen publicly. What has kept the Elliott-Ross marriage intact across more than 4 decades is not a single formula, but a collection of consistent choices. The most visible one is the refusal to make their relationship into public content. They attend events together and they appear on red carpets, but they have never treated their marriage as something to be narrated for fans or analyzed in interview segments. That privacy has given the relationship room to be real rather than performed. There is also the matter of mutual understanding that comes from 2 people who have spent their entire adult lives in the same industry. Both Elliot and Ross understand what a film shoot demands, what it means to be away for months at a time, and what it feels like to inhabit a character so completely that you bring some of it home. That shared fluency removes a whole category of misunderstanding that breaks apart marriages where only one person has that experience. Ross retired from acting in 2006 after a career that included landmark films like The Graduate, for which she received a Golden Globe nomination, and Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid. She had also appeared in The Stepford Wives, The Colbys, and Donnie Darko across a career spanning more than 4 decades. Since retiring, she has lived the private life that the Malibu Ranch enables. Elliot has continued working, adding major roles in Justified, The Ranch, 1883, and Landman to his resume well into his 70s and 80s, demonstrating that the voice and the presence only grow richer with time. In 2007, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum inducted Elliot into their Hall of Great Western Performers, a recognition that placed him alongside the figures who shaped the genre he has spent his career honoring. The fact that he received it while still actively working said something about the longevity of his contribution. He was not being celebrated as a historical figure, but as someone still in the room, still making the kind of work that earns that kind of acknowledgement. The private life behind the public icon. There is a version of Sam Elliott's life that would have looked very different. He is the kind of talent that invites a certain kind of celebrity, the sort of distinctive presence that generates attention effortlessly. The voice alone has made him the face of major advertising campaigns for companies including Dodge, IBM, and Coors. He narrated the Super Bowl 45 introductions for both the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Green Bay Packers in 2010. He is, in every measurable way, a public figure of significant reach. And yet, the actual life he lives has almost nothing to do with that public reach. The Malibu ranch keeps him away from the kind of social scene that most celebrities at his level navigate as part of the job. He does not frequent restaurants where photographers wait outside. He does not cycle through the party circuit or appear on the charity gala calendar unless there is a specific reason. The ranch is a deliberate retreat from all of that, chosen not because he cannot handle attention, but because he simply prefers something else. Elliot grew up in a household that valued hard work and practicality above everything else. His father, Henry Nelson Elliott, worked for the Department of the Interior as an official for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and his mother was a physical training instructor. He has spoken warmly about his father's work ethic, even while acknowledging that his father initially disapproved of his choice to pursue acting. His father told him he had a snowball's chance in hell of having a career in Hollywood. Elliot recalled that line years later with a kind of affection, noting that his father was a realist and a hard worker, and that he fashioned his own work ethic after that example. That foundational seriousness about work translated into an approach to Hollywood that was never about glamour. Elliot moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting and supported himself with construction work while studying the craft. He also served in the California Air National Guard's 146th Airlift Wing before the unit relocated from Van Nuys Airport to Channel Islands Air National Guard Station in 1990. The combination of manual labor, military service, and serious acting training produced someone who understood the value of showing up and doing the work without expecting the work to be celebrated before it was finished. His career began not on a film set, but on a stage. His first significant moment of recognition came from a local newspaper review of a production of Guys and Dolls while he was at college. The review said he should become a professional actor. He took that encouragement seriously enough to pack up and move to Hollywood. That trajectory, starting from a stage production reviewed in a local newspaper rather than from a talent agency call or a famous relative, set the tone for everything that followed. He built the career one honest step at a time. His earliest memories, by his own account, were of hiking and fishing trips with his father in Oregon, and that connection to outdoor life never left him. The characters he plays on screen, men tied to the land, bound by codes of loyalty and silence, men who exist most fully in open country rather than closed rooms, are not inventions. They are drawn from something genuine in his own biography. The ranch in Malibu and the larger spread in Oregon are not props in a Western lifestyle performance. They are the actual conditions of his life when he is not on set. In the Cowboys and Indians magazine interview, Elliot said something that cuts through all the celebrity framing and gets to the essential truth of who he is. Talking about the balance between his Malibu life and his Oregon property, he said that, as all of them were natives, the California roots run deep, and that it was a nice balance, with both of them being very fortunate to have those places. That phrasing, the emphasis on being fortunate, the use of the word nice rather than extraordinary, reveals a person who does not experience his life in dramatic terms. He experiences it as something to be grateful for and tended carefully. The 2007 induction into the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum Hall of Great Western Performers was not the only recognition that reflected how seriously Elliot takes the Western tradition as a craft. He served as a spokesperson for the American Beef Council, narrated significant national broadcasts, and has been associated throughout his career with the authentic working culture of the American West rather than its romanticized Hollywood version. That distinction matters to him, and it shows in how he lives when no cameras are running. His daughter Cleo has absorbed something of that orientation. She has maintained a private life that puts her parents' approach to privacy in a clear context. Her musical career has unfolded without the kind of tabloid coverage that might follow a celebrity's child who sought that kind of spotlight. She too is an animal lover, with horses among the animals she keeps, continuing the thread that connects the Elliot Ross household to the land and the creatures on it across generations. The Malibu property, with its ocean views and rustic structure, continues to serve as the base from which the family operates for much of the year. Cleo lives nearby in Malibu. In late 2025, she and Catherine Ross accompanied Elliot to the advanced screening for the second season of Landmen in Fort Worth, Texas. The family turns out for each other's moments, then returns to the quiet that the ranch provides. What Sam Elliott has built across 8 decades of life is something that Hollywood rarely produces and almost never sustains. A genuine home. A marriage that has outlasted the careers of most of the people who were working when it started. A relationship with the land that goes deeper than aesthetics. A professional reputation built entirely on showing up and doing the work rather than managing a public image. And through all of it, a kind of privacy that was not forced on him by circumstance, but chosen deliberately every single day as the life he actually wanted to live. The Malibu Ranch is not where Sam Elliott became famous. It is where he became who he actually is, which is a much harder and more interesting thing to be. Away from the sets and the screenings and the press appearances, there is a man who wakes up on a piece of ground he has known for more than 40 years, with a woman he has loved for longer than most marriages last, in a life shaped by horses and open skies, and the kind of quiet that has to be protected to survive. That is the private life inside the Malibu Ranch, and it turns out it is exactly as good as it sounds. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.